Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. We are looking forward to an update and some discussion around the September quarterly report for Metro Mining. And we are joined this morning with the CEO and Managing Director, Simon Wensley, and the Chief Financial Officer, Nathan Quinlan. I'll hand it over to Simon to talk through some of the great points from this very, very strong quarter, and we may have some questions at the end. So thank you, and over to you, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, definitely. I'll try and get through quick run through the quarterly report, and then we'll definitely leave time for some questions at the end. Well, look, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. This quarterly report is again a pleasing report from our perspective. It demonstrates that, I think that we're making great strides towards that target of getting full implementation of our 7 million tonne per annum expansion. We've tried to bring on elements of the expansion as they're ready, and then try to make the most of those. And that's been the strategy, and that we're seeing the fruits of that in this quarterly. So 1.6 million tonnes of shipments, and that's generated $16 million at site EBITDA level. So conveniently for the mathematicians amongst us, that generates $10 per tonne of margin. So what's contributed to that obviously are prices, but from this point of view, the FOB price is actually flat from last quarter, although delivered prices in the market are higher. But that's meant that all of this gain has come from the operational side, and we're starting to see in our costs the delivery of some of those economies of scale. Unfortunately, in this quarter, that's been offset somewhat by inflation to fuel and labour, which I think is being shared pretty much across the sector. And one of the ways in which we're trying to be creative to get more tonnes out is to use small geared vessels, and the cost of those vessels is a bit higher than our Cape freight contracts, so the large vessels contracts. So that's obviously mitigated some of that economy of scale pulling through. However, pretty much all of those factors are now in place, and the step up that we're going to see in the next quarter, further step up, is going to flow through, I hope, right the way through to the bottom line. So look, I think from that perspective, what I might do is share the quarterly, and then there's a couple of interesting charts and tables, and we can sort of talk through those. So hopefully, can we see that? Peter, can you see that well?
Yes, that's come up.
Okay. So the first thing to talk about is the market. So one reason we're very keen to bring on elements of our expansion as fast as we possibly can is that the market is strong, and you can see the top line of this graph, which represents just the Chinese market. And the Chinese market, which is a very large part of the traded bauxite market, is already up 10% over last year, which was a record year. So it looks like we're heading for another record import market into China as well. So just to give you a sense of that, so 10%, is roughly another 15 million tonnes. So that's effectively 3 times Metro's current capacity, all being added in demand in 1 year. So it's a significant growth in the market, and you're seeing that reflected in prices. So we show this graph every quarter. It's the delivered price of bauxite into China based on shipments and averages. So you can see that the Guinea price, which has got a lot more spot volume in it, reacted more quickly to this and has stayed very stable up around $70 per tonne delivered. And the Australian bauxite, which is a combination of us and the other suppliers out of Australia, that's rising slowly to meet that as our contracts. We're much more contracted in that space, and so the prices are rising to meet that. So as you can see from that graph, the normal sort of differential, if you average it out over time, is roughly $8 to $10, and so we expect that price, that differential, to be reestablished in due course. Might then pass over to Nathan to just give you a quick run through the operational performance numbers. So Nathan, just tell me when you want me to scroll forward.
Yeah, sure thing. Maybe just scroll down sort of half a page, and we'll just speak to I guess some of the headline numbers. Simon's already spoken a little bit about the pricing environment that we're operating in now, which is thankfully on the rise, which is fantastic, and you're seeing that being reflected particularly in that average CIF pricing that's being achieved relative to some of those earlier quarters that we've got there on the chart. I suppose what's been key for us from a financial perspective for Q3 is this is the first quarter in which we're really starting to ramp up that throughput rate on the way through to the 6 million tonnes. So the 1.6 million tonnes for Q3 represents sort of on average about a 5 million tonne rate, and so this has been our first opportunity to start to see some of those scaling benefits come through into Q3 that we've been looking forward to, and no doubt some of you have been following in our DFS and FID presentations, and so you can see that reflected in Q3 coming down to about just under $25 a tonne at the moment, which is pleasing to see some of that start to be realised as we see that uptick. As you can imagine, and by no means unique to Metro, we are seeing some inflationary pressures come through in those cash costs. We're probably tracking at the moment between fuel and other inflationary costs, probably equivalent to about $2.50 a tonne at the moment, inflation. So from that perspective, it's pleasing to still be able to see these scaling benefits come through, even if slightly being obscured by those inflation pressures. So pleasing, in terms of uptick in production, we've timed our run well there to make sure that we're getting these benefits in this inflationary environment. So it's good to see that start to come through, and look forward to seeing further scaling benefits come through in Q4 as well. From a site EBITDA, for those who saw sort of, I guess, our previous presentation, is what you're seeing here is the continuation of a theme that we saw first of all in Q2 is the general margin recovery of this site. It's good to see those consistent site results. Like Simon mentioned, we've taken advantage with our dual loading strategy. We've taken advantage of the land infrastructure capacity that's on site at the moment to sort of take that half step up to the 6 million tonne for next year. Part of that dual loading strategy is obviously we're using these geared vessels, which are a little bit more expensive. I guess to give you a sense of Australian dollar per tonne delta between the Capesize and geared vessels is around sort of $3 to $4 to $5 per tonne, depending on the market at any given rate. So obviously what you'll see once the OFT mobilises into size, you'll see that margin uptick as we move straight to a 100% geared loading scenario. I think that's about
Thanks, Nathan.
Yep.
Yeah, look, I might just come back to the production graph here. We've showed various versions of this. We've stopped comparing ourselves to last year because I think we're now, seeing the expansion flowing through. Obviously, we put in place the barge loading upgrade during the last wet season. We also worked on the screens, but most importantly with the screens, I think what we're seeing has been the benefit of a new approach to the maintenance and the operation of those screens, and much greater availability and the throughput going through. So look, I think one of the words that we're using a lot inside the company is consistent. So being consistent, taking the variability out of our business, and the supply chain from mining through hauling, screening, and barge loading and transshipping is far less variable than it's been over the last couple of years. There you can see the rate, the 4 million tonne rate, which we pretty much hit and exceeded in Q2, and then, as Nathan said, the 5 million ton rate was broadly achieved from July, August, September, and then you can see I purposely put in the month to date, or in October there, and you can see that we've then been climbing up to that 6 million ton rate, which is exactly what we wanted to demonstrate in the last quarter of this year. So we need to do roughly 2 million tons to meet the top end of our guidance. That's exactly what our internal planning is aimed at. That's what our schedule is aimed at, and so we need to achieve that 6 million ton rate for the last sort of 3 months, with an assumption of a bit of a step down in December as we get a bit more difficult weather. But you can see there that we're on track for that. Just a quick comment for those who follow us. There was an incident with one of our chartered vessels earlier in the year, where it sustained a hull breach. That incident has now effectively been fully resolved. The vessel was repaired and sailed to China. Some of the bauxite was offloaded using a smaller vessel, just to make sure that was very safe. All that bauxite has arrived, was discharged, was tested to ensure that there was no contamination from seawater, and so both us and the customer are effectively now out of that process, and with no further implications from both of our sides. So that's a good piece of news. In terms of the expansion project, the FID that we announced in March was, in May, was the culmination of a lot of work. We did make some changes to our DFS case in terms of the screening technology, and also in terms of the transhipper, which we've sort of covered quite a lot in detail in previous presentations and previous discussions. Those those key aspects are both looking on track at the moment. The OFT arrived in China during September and is now undergoing its refurbishment in the Chinese yard. The screening, all the large elements of the screening plant, so the apron feeder and the wobbler in particular, are nearing the end of their manufacturing process, and civil works is effectively going to start on site in November. Look, the other elements, though, there are other elements to the upgrade to meeting the 7 million tons for 2024. We are getting an additional tug. So Metro purchased during the quarter a large tug that will be primarily used for moving the OFT around, but it will also then be available for other duties as well. And there'll be a further, what we call a tow tug, a shallow draft tow tug, which will be arriving next year. We had one 90-meter barge arrive at the end of September. That we'd actually hoped that was going to arrive a bit earlier, but there was a bit of a delay in the shipyard in Indonesia. That's arrived, and we'll get 2 more of those larger 90-meter barges targeted for February. And so look, there's a few other elements to go that'll get us from the 6 million ton rate up to the 7 million ton rate, and so they all seem to be on track. There are some other replacements of mobile equipment, but they're pretty much normal sustaining from here on. All of the expansionary mobile equipment is on site, and trucks, trailers, etc. There will be some sustaining replacement for some of the loaders and some of the dozers, but that's not part of the expansion. Look, I think there's some, obviously we take our safety, environment, social very seriously. There's quite a few dot points and comments in here which show how we're going, but I'll leave those for now. Look, I think just to emphasize, that where we want to get to, what we said in the DFS was that we're going to head towards that $15 a ton margin. That's at the sort of 6 million ton rate. That's still our intention. Of course, inflationary costs are a bit higher, but that's also the case for every other bauxite producer around the world. So I expect that inflation, particularly the fuel side, will flow into everybody's costs, and therefore prices should react to the sort of similar or even greater extent, given that the Guinea bauxite comes from a very long way away. So from a freight perspective, 2 months of shipping travel versus a sort of 10 days from our site. So it will actually disproportionately affect the Guinea bauxite's landed cost into its markets more than us. So I do expect the cost curve to actually steepen slightly. So I think whatever losses that I suppose that we're suffering from inflation, I do expect that to be replaced from a long-term price perspective. $15 a ton, I guess you can do the maths at 6 to 7 million tons next year. That's what we're targeting, and that will provide us with plenty of funds to start paying down debt and have some left over for other activities. So look, why don't I pause there, Peter, and then we can take some questions.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Thanks, Nathan. Yep, a few questions coming through, and I've got a couple here as well. Ramp up is a notorious term for people to run from the market, and there's always brings fear, but so far so good. You're pretty happy with the smoothness of the ramp up to date?
Yeah, I think I am. I guess I'm always pushing the team to try to optimize and maximize the output. I was hoping that we might get a little bit more through in the month of September. We were affected by a slightly early or abnormal erosion of our channel that we used to take the vessel to the barges out to the transshipment area, and we had to bring in some maintenance equipment to bed level the bed area where we use where we take those out, and that caused a temporary reduction in the channel depth, which affected pretty much what we could load on every single barge. So that happened at the end of August and affected us in September. That's now been fixed and back to normal. And as I said, I think the fourth 90-meter barge, I was hoping to arrive in August, but it only arrived at the end of September. So, but look, standing back, achieving the 5 million ton rate, that's a 25% increase on the capacity that we had prior to that, and that's a big step in anyone's books. And we've got another 20% that we're stepping up in this next quarter. So it's a pretty big step. This is not an incremental. It's not an incremental expansion. It's significant, 75% in total from the 4 million to the 7 million ton rate. So when you take that perspective, I'm extremely happy at the way we're going.
Yeah, it's not insubstantial, those steps, and to do it smoothly is the challenge. So far you're meeting. But talking about the channel, that brings me to another question that's come through. The scene behind you is nice and calm, but the area is notorious for cyclone weather. What protections do you have for the vessels and the site facilities in the event of a cyclone up there?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we have a very detailed cyclone management plan, cyclone protocol. So that deals with everything from human, obviously most importantly the human aspect, getting people on and off the site. Also the people who remain on site, being safe. So we have effectively cyclone rated buildings that we can shelter in, and all of our equipment have specific tie down lugs and things that we chain equipment to. So on site, that's the way we go. And we also have in terms of having large amounts of rain, we have a lot of channels and sediment dams to manage that. In terms of the marine equipment, the river is obviously our friend in that respect. So we have cyclone moorings for all of our vessels, which are rated and audited to specific loads that suit all of the vessels. So when a cyclone, and we obviously monitor these things in a very detailed way. And so well in advance of a cyclone occurring, we pull our vessels in to the river, and we moor them to these cyclone moorings. So we don't expose the vessels out in the Gulf to these issues. So look, it's a very detailed plan. It's something we share with our local communities and also with our neighbours, our other mining neighbours. And in those cases, it's certainly, we certainly help each other out.
Simon, the latest Chinese economic figures are improved and hence supporting iron ore prices and other bulks such as bauxite, as you've shown today. Those prices are also strong. How responsive are other bauxite jurisdictions such as Guinea? You said sometimes the long shipping times provide a negative for that. How do other jurisdictions respond, and do we have the ability to, I guess we are doing that during the ramp-up phase, but in increasing price environment, how quickly can the market respond?
Look, I think in general, mining projects take quite a long time to study, to then approve, to get regulatory approval for, and then to construct and ramp up. So it's not a very rapid expansion, really. The Indonesian exit had been flagged for quite some time. So I guess that was one reason why we fast-tracked our expansion plan, and one reason why we're sort of trying to get as much out this year incrementally, even though costs may be slightly higher to do so. In Guinea, there were a couple of projects that were already in the pipeline, and they've been able to react to that. But frankly, the market is tight, and so we're seeing stocks reduce. We're seeing domestic supply reduced in China, and at these prices, it actually, from those Guinea prices, we are seeing some, for example, Atlantic bauxite come into. Other Atlantic bauxite come in, so from Jamaica and from other African states. So it's not material, but it sort of covers a small gap in that sense. So there is a bit of elasticity in the global trade that does allow that boom in China to be met. But the reason prices are going up is that demand is still there and supply is still tight.
And so I know you've had a few trips across the sea, customers in recent times. Can you give us some feedback on that engagement? What their outlook is, what they're looking for in terms of the supply?
Well, look, the aluminium is the greatest beneficiary metal to this energy transition. So decarbonisation cannot happen without aluminium. So whilst there is an export element to China's growth in this sector, there's also a very strong domestic requirement for them to proceed through this energy transition. So new poles and wires distribution, their own domestic market for electric vehicles, for transportation, lightweight transportation, and indeed renewables, so solar and wind going in all over the place in China. So just domestically, their aluminium sector is ramping up to try to meet that demand. That's having a flow-on effect through the alumina step right the way through to bauxite. But unfortunately, Chinese domestic bauxite cannot meet that demand. It's actually going the other way. It's dropping. So this is why we're getting this sort of significant growth in the bauxite sector, and that will continue probably at least for the next 5 years. China has put a sort of a notional cap on its aluminium production, but it still hasn't reached that cap, and so there's still going to be top line growth in demand for the metal and for alumina and bauxite. So, from that perspective, our customers are all in growth mode, and they're in growth mode at the coast, which means they are planning to import the bauxite that they need. From a supply diversity perspective, obviously Guinea has grown tremendously since, over the last 10 years, and that's supplied a lot of the growth in China. But with the exit of Indonesia, there's I think a significant concern from our customers, both existing and new ones, that they don't want to be held hostage to a single supply source, particularly one like Guinea, which is obviously has had its political issues, is a relatively poor country, doesn't have a lot of energy, and is so far away, right? So strategically, what we're seeing is a real thirst to engage with us, to look forward, 3, 5, 10 years, and say, well, how are we going to source that extra bauxite and put that technology in that will optimize the treatment of Australian bauxite, and in particular Metro bauxite. So we're hosting customers here on our sites over the next sort of 6 months as well, and that's just a sign that is going to happen.
And Simon, I think Southeast Asia is where 50% of the world's EV electric vehicles are actually manufactured, and it's including the battery cells, which I think aluminium makes up about 19% of battery cells, but also the framework, the chassis, the core structure of the EV. 50% of global production of Southeast Asia is pretty significant and likely to grow, including the latest Mercedes EV comes out of Thailand. Where are the smelters located for the aluminium?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There are smelters in Malaysia, for example, which supply into this market, but also there's an export market out of China for this, and I know that India has got plans, certainly in the smelting, on the coast, now that they're building their energy grid up. So I think this is going to evolve over that period, and the backward integrating into alumina is not a trivial technological step. Alumina refineries are very complex beast. They're a chemical process. There's a lot of capital, billions of dollars to build these refineries, and you've also got to handle the red mud, the waste from the bauxite treatment. So there's a large requirement for a large red mud storage area. So there's a lot of I think aluminium, where you've got captive and low and competitively priced electricity, that will grow. But I think the chain is a little bit more difficult to be able to replicate. So I think alumina is going to continue to be made, for example, in Australia and in China and in the Middle East. I think those will probably be the centers. I think India will grow, and we intend to sort of continue to investigate supply into India. But from a bauxite perspective, the sort of volumes that the growth is going to need, I think, is really still going to come out of West Africa and out of Australia.
All right. Well, that's pretty much the questions we had here today. I've been reminded by one of our participants that you will be presenting at the Noosa Mining Conference. So any of our Queensland shareholders, please get along and come and see you at the booth and listen to that presentation, which will also be live streamed. That should be a good event. Is there anything else I'd like to leave our viewers with for the weeks and months ahead, Simon?
No, look, I think we're marching forward positively. We're demonstrating the run rates that we need to get to the 6 million tonnes already, although that's not a fully optimized chain, as we've talked about. That fully optimized chain will come into play next year, and then will lift us up, from that 6 to 7. I'm confident that the market is strong and is going to continue to be strong for the next few years at least. Therefore, I think the margins that we've put into our FID statement are achievable, if not to be exceeded. So I think, if we do the math, the economies of scale flowing through this metro supply chain are going to generate significant profits at the corporate level. So look, I just encourage you to take good positions now. Come with us on the ride.
And a good message there too, I think, when you look at today's share price. All right, gentlemen and our audience, thank you for joining us here today, and we look forward to the next update and look forward to hearing the presentation at Noosa in November.
Right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Ta.